The beast has 10 horns, but it also has 7 heads, as we learned in the recent video, the beast from the sea in Daniel 7. Those 7 heads were Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and the Islamic Caliphate. If you want to review why that is, check out the video. So the 4 horns we have already included have within them Assyria, Babylon, Persia, and Greece, the land masses of those kingdoms. So we need to add a horn for Egypt. And the Islamic Caliphate was started in Saudi Arabia, so let's add a horn there as well. That leaves Rome as the only head unaccounted for. Do we add a horn for Rome in Italy? Well, maybe and maybe not. As we explained in the previous mentioned video, the eastern half of the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, was based out of Turkey. So that head is already accounted for. Let's keep going and try to figure out all the horns. The kingdom of Jordan is mentioned in several end-time texts, and it's sitting all by itself, surrounded by these other horns. So let's make it the 7th horn. Let's look at another end-time text that we've already seen and try to figure out the other 3. This familiar passage is from Ezekiel and refers to the Gog of Magog war. Magog, Gomer, Beth Togarmah that are mentioned in this passage are thought to be parts of Turkey and are accounted for by horns already. So is Persia. Cush is thought to be Libya, so we can add an 8th horn there, and Put is thought to be Sudan, so we can add the 9th horn there. We have 1 horn to go. The lands of Meshach and Tubal are usually thought to be an area just north of Turkey around the Caspian and Black Seas. So let's put our 10th horn there. Although I have to admit, this is the one I am least sure about. This produces a 10-horned confederacy completely surrounding Israel for hundreds of miles in every direction on land. The little horn is now about to begin his career of conquest. He plucks out 3 of the 10 horns by the roots. Before we examine which horns this might be, let's stop for a moment and consider what it means to pluck them out by the roots. In order for the little horn to pluck out 3 of the original horns, it must mean that these horns are independent of each other and aligned in some sort of confederacy or alliance. We are told the terrifying beast has 10 horns, yet 3 get plucked out by the roots. One only does this if they, the horns, have some independence about them. The 10 horns aren't an empire just yet. And when we hear plucked out by the roots, this is what we usually think of, an uprooted tree. I have even heard many excellent Bible scholars say at this point, there are 3 less horns, that the Antichrist took 3 horns out of the way, so now there are only 7, plus the little horn makes 8. But I don't believe that's correct. Because in Revelation we read, the 10 horns hand over power to the beast, implying there are still 10 at that time. So this must be a different type of plucking up by the roots. We are told in Daniel 11 that the Antichrist seizes the kingdom by intrigue or cunning deception. And since we know that there are still 10 horns when he's done, does he uproot the existing 3 kings and place his own puppet rulers in their place? To me, this seems to be what the scriptures imply. So now, what 3 horns does he replace? We are given 2 clues about how this intrigue occurs. In Daniel 8, we are given the directions in which he becomes great. To the south, to the east, and toward the beautiful land. And the second clue is that, as we've seen in previous videos, the beast is a composite of the leopard, the bear, and the lion. So I think it's a safe assumption that these other 3 horns are involved. Revelation also tells us that the beast was like a leopard, that its body is that of a leopard, and that the leopard predominates. So let's return to a map and look at a scenario that includes both of these clues. We have the little horn coming out of the beast like a leopard. Let's follow his path. Daniel 8 says he first goes to the south, into the land of Nimrod, where the demon beast is from, and uproots the horn there. Then Daniel 8 says he goes east, into the beast like a bear and uproots its horn. Finally, Daniel 8 tells us from there, he goes due west, back toward Israel, the beautiful land, and uproots the horn of the beast like a lion. Scripture not only tells us where the beast comes from based on this analysis, he comes out of a leopard's territory, but also the direction and order that he overcomes the other horns. This exact order and direction in which the little horn grows exceedingly great confirms for me that we have the right alignment of future nations in this interpretation. And we have constructed exactly what the Bible describes. The beast was like a leopard. The leopard predominates. The leopard has 4 heads, or acquired influence over the other 4 horns. And it was given dominion. So the leopard acquired power over the other beasts. What are the 4 wings? Well, I'm not sure. Perhaps armies, since in Jeremiah 4:13 the armies of Nebuchadnezzar were described like eagles. So now we have shown that the little horn arises somewhere in the territory of the leopard, probably in the eastern part, because in Isaiah and Micah he is called the Assyrian, and that is the land that was ancient Assyria. We know his first move of conquest, to acquire the 3 other horns of the goat by intrigue. But when does he do this in relation to the tribulation period? Before or after it begins? And now we're going to drop a bombshell. A total shock to almost everyone viewing. The little horn does all of this that we've looked at today before the 7-year tribulation or 70th week of Daniel begins. Before, not after. Daniel 7 and 8 detail the short but brutal career of the little horn, the Antichrist. And in this video we will discuss when it begins and what he does. After Daniel received these visions, he was shaken and sick for days. In the same way, we should soberly consider them, but with confidence that Jesus will triumph in the end. A critical but overlooked point is that the Antichrist arises only after the 10 horns are established, not before. When I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, Daniel 7:8. First, the little horn is a minor horn at first. This seems to eliminate all the candidates who are major horns already, like Trump, Macron, and the Pope, from being the Antichrist. It is most likely the Antichrist is someone from the Middle East that, as of right now, has never made the news, but will arise after the 10 horns are established. It is after this that we learn something incredible. Something that allows us to time all of these events. Daniel's vision takes him into the throne room of God. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, and its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. How does this allow us to time the rise of the little horn? This may not seem like a familiar scene to most, but these 2 verses in Daniel about God's throne room are the exact same events as found in and expanded upon in Revelation chapters 4 and 5. In Daniel, there are 2 verses. In Revelation, 2 chapters. In Daniel, the prophet saw the vision. In Revelation, it was John. But there are an amazing 5 exact similarities between these sections of Scripture. And we're going to look at them in a second. What makes this a key time stamp is that the vision in Revelation occurs prior to the opening of the 7-sealed scroll, which is acknowledged by most as the beginning of the 70th week of Daniel. So if this vision is the same as the one in Daniel, then everything that happens in Daniel 7 and 8 prior to this vision also occurs prior to the 70th week. This is a key insight and one of the most significant time markers in the career of the little horn. Again, If the vision of the throne room is the beginning of the 70th week, everything in Daniel 7 and Daniel 8 before that are before the 70th week. So this means that the events we learned about in the last video, the war between the ram and the goat, Iran and Turkey, and the formation of the four beasts from the breakup of the goat, and the little horn plucking out three of the horns to reform the four into a single kingdom again, all of these things take place before the thrones are placed in heaven, and then before judgment begins and before the 70th week. Wow! I'm sure this video series in Daniel has been quite a ride, and this last revelation has probably been the most earth-shaking of all. So let's look at the scriptures and find those 5 similarities that show Daniel 7, 9 through 10 are the same as Revelation 4 through 5. There are 5 of these similarities. First, the thrones are placed. Daniel 7, 9, as I looked, thrones were placed. Revelation 4:4, around the throne were 24 thrones, and upon the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting. Second, the Lord upon his throne. Daniel 7:9, the Ancient of Days took his seat. Revelation 4:2 through 3, a throne was standing in heaven, and one seated upon the throne, and he who was sitting was like a jasper stone and a sardius in appearance. Third, the appearance of the throne. Daniel 7:9 through 10. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out before him. And in Revelation 4:5, out from the throne came flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder. His attendants. Fourth, thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. In Daniel 7:10. Revelation 5, many angels around the thrones and living creatures and the elders, and the number of them was myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands. This number, thousands of thousands and myriads of myriads, is an exact quote in the Greek and identical between the two passages, and direct quotes are one way the Bible shows that two things are the same. And fifth, the books were opened in Daniel 7, and the 7-sealed scroll is opened in Revelation. So this 5 fingerprint similarities show that Daniel and John saw the same vision. Now when we read the books were opened, the 7-sealed scroll was only one of these books. What exactly are these books or scrolls? They are opened in relation to the first resurrection that takes place after the 6th seal. The same books are opened at the second resurrection as well, and we read about them in Revelation 20. And I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from the things that were written in the books according to their deeds. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Revelation 20:12 through 15. So a book of deeds, or what a person has done in their life, is opened, and the book of life. These are the books that are opened, and all men are judged by them. The dead who are written in the book of life are resurrected at this point during the 70th week of Daniel, and they are caught up into the air with the living written in the book of life. That would be the rapture. Now, according to Jewish custom, 3 books are opened on Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, and then closed on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The book of the righteous, the book of the unrighteous, and the book of those in between. If a man is deemed in between, judgment is delayed from Yom Teruah, which is Rosh Hashanah, to Yom Kippur. It is during that period of time that a man is given opportunity to repent before the book is closed and his destiny is sealed. So the books are opened on the Feast of Trumpet to begin the 70th week. This idea of being in between is just like what was said to the church of Laodicea. They were neither cold, unrighteous, nor hot, righteous, but they were lukewarm, or in between. So Daniel and John were observing the very same events in similar visions, but yet lived 600 years apart. We've just seen an exact fingerprint similarity of Daniel 7, 9 through 10 with Revelation 4 through 6. And by the way, this wasn't the only vision that Daniel and John both saw. We will get to these other visions in another video. But the importance of these visions being the same is that the 70th week and the opening of the seven-sealed scroll happens after all the commotion in the Gentile nations that takes place in Daniel 7 and Daniel 8. For instance, the goat overcoming the ram and then splitting into the four beasts or four horns. The rising of the 10 horns at that same time, and then the rising of a little horn amongst the 10 horns and on one of the horns of the goat. It is only at this point that the 70th week begins. Now Jesus alluded to this in the Gospel of Luke, the parable of the fig tree and all the trees. Behold the fig tree, Israel, and all the trees, the Gentile nations round about. As soon as they put forth leaves, you see it and know for yourselves that summer is now near. Now Mark and Matthew's parallel accounts mention only the fig tree, so most have seen Israel become a nation in 1948 and think the time could be here. But all the trees need to be in place for the 70th week to begin. Israel is already sprouting leaves, but the Gentile nations need to undergo the commotion we talked about first. Then the 70th week is about to begin. One of the first things the little horn does after the beginning of the 70th week is to attempt to consolidate his kingdom. Daniel 11 speaks of an end-time war between the king of the north and the king of the south. These are the particulars of the little horn's military campaign to consolidate his kingdom. At the end time, the king of the south will collide with him, and the king of the north will storm against him, that is, the king of the south, with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships, and he will enter countries, overflow them, and pass through. Daniel 11:40. Let's look at our map and see how this might play out. If you remember from our last video, the little horn plucked out 3 of the 4 horns, or kings, and replaced them with puppet leaders under his control. But this is only 4 of the 10 horns. He wants to consolidate all of them. Let's return to our map of the 10 horns to see what this might mean. By intrigue, the little horn has acquired influence over the entire area that was the goat kingdom, the area that's colored purple, green, red, and yellow. This area is also similar to the ancient Seleucid Empire that formed during the wars of the Diadochi after Alexander the Great's death. In the Bible, the rulers of this region were known as the kings of the north. These kings of the north were in opposition to the other major kingdom that formed out of Alexander's realm, the Ptolemaic kingdom, the kings of the south. And Daniel 11:40 through 41 that we just looked at tells us these ancient wars will repeat in the end times, and that the Antichrist will ultimately triumph. Who are these kings of the south? Looking at the map, there are 5 northern horns and 5 southern horns. Might the southern horns act as one to oppose the aggression of the little horn and become the kings of the south? Maybe. And look what the Bible says about this war. Let's take it apart and look at it one piece at a time. First, the text says the king of the north, or the little horn, will enter Israel, the beautiful land, and that many countries will fall. But this text shows who doesn't originally fall: Edom, Moab, and Ammon, which collectively, most scholars believe, is Jordan. And we continue to read that he will gain control over the hidden treasures of gold and silver, over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and Ethiopians, although the correct Hebrew term here is Cush, which is Sudan, will follow at his heels. Daniel 11:41 through 43. We can see that Egypt, then Libya, then the Sudan, all fall to the Antichrist. Again, 4 of the 5 southern horns of the 10-kingdom confederacy were mentioned in just these couple verses. And that really provides us with confirmation that we are on the right track in terms of the identity of the 10 horns. However, the passage is very interesting because we learn for a period of time Jordan will remain outside of Antichrist control, and Saudi Arabia is not mentioned directly at all. However, we know at some point, which is probably the abomination of desolation that happens at the midpoint of the 7 years, all 10 horns will give their power to the Antichrist. The 10 horns which you saw are the 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. Revelation 17:12 through 13. So we know that the Antichrist will consolidate and control all 10 horns of this region. But the Middle East is only one portion of the world. What occurs elsewhere? I'm sure you're wondering. We learn he will destroy to an extraordinary degree, but his power is not his own. In Daniel 11, we read a very similar passage. We learn he will take action against the strongest fortresses, that could be Western nations, with the help of a foreign god. Who is this? Most likely it is the demon beast that possesses him that we learned about in the first video in this series. People in Western nations believe they may be safe and secure behind their military might. But both of these passages indicate that the Antichrist will be powerful because of the demonic power that possesses him, not due to his own ability or resources. Israel and the USA may think they're safe, but they are not. Supernatural power trumps earthly power. Western nations are in for a rude shock. Is it at this point, after the consolidating of his kingdom and the weakening of the nations, that the world reaches the midpoint of the 70th week of Daniel? Let's see what else happens at the midpoint. First, we see that Daniel 8 tells us that the stars of heaven fall to the earth. Is this the same event as Revelation 12:9? And the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. It is likely at the same time the little horn takes over the temple, as we read about in Daniel 8:11 through 12. As we can see, he exalts himself over Jesus, the commander of the host, and ends the sacrifice in the temple. This is, of course, the same event as seen in Daniel 9:27. For half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abomination shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. This same abomination or transgression of desolation is also mentioned in Daniel 11:31. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. Jesus mentions this as well in Matthew 24:15. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, Matthew 24:15. And Paul mentions this sign as well in 2 Thessalonians 2:3 through 4. The man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. It is the single most important sign of the end times. But what about the Jews? How will they accept him? The beast's purpose is to receive worship that is due God and take it for himself and Satan. Revelation 13 tells us there are 4 means that the beast uses to receive this worship. This is a crucial, crucial point. The beast does not receive worship because he is deemed to be worthy to be the Messiah of Israel, as many claim, that somehow Jews will accept him. This is inaccurate. He receives worship out of deception and fear. In fact, in John 5:43, Jesus said, "I have come in my Father's name, and you did not receive me. If another comes in his own name, you will receive him." So Jesus came in his Father's name, Yehovah, as the Jewish Messiah. The Antichrist will come in his own name, not as a Jewish Messiah. Coming in the Father's name also means that Jesus fulfilled the Father's requirements for a Messiah. The Antichrist comes not fulfilling those things, and not in the name of the God of Israel. The Jews will worship the little horn, not necessarily accept him, because of the four means he uses to receive worship. The first of the four means is by deception, by signs and wonders performed by the false prophet. And he makes the earth and those who dwell in it worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire comes down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. Revelation 13:12-13. Jesus referred to these signs and tells us that they will be incredibly convincing. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and will show great signs and wonders, so as to mislead, if possible, even the elect. Matthew 24:24. Those who see with their eyes and not with faith will be completely overcome by these signs. The second means is the Antichrist's ability to wage war. They worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him?" Revelation 13:4. Well, why is this? Remember, Daniel 8 and Daniel 11 tell us the Antichrist is empowered by a demonic beast to wage war. The world will recognize the supernatural in his victories. He will win when he shouldn't. And they'll worship him because of this supernatural aspect of his military exploits. The third means by which the beast gains worship is economic. The false prophet implements the mark of the beast. He provides that no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark. Revelation 13:17. No one will be able to participate in the world system of commerce without taking the beast's mark. Those who are unprepared for this and unwilling to go off the grid at that point will worship the beast to get what they need. Food, houses, cars, jobs, everything. And the final means the Antichrist uses to receive worship will be out of fear of death. And it was given to him, the false prophet, to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak, and causes many who do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Revelation 13:15. So the dwellers of the earth will make an evil image of the beast, and it will be given breath and will speak, and those who don't worship the image will be killed. So the career of the little horn will center on receiving worship by these four means: deception by false signs and wonders, supernatural military victories, economic control, and fear of death if people don't worship him. All people groups and religions are susceptible to these things. The little horn's ethnic identity can't be determined solely by his gaining worship from this group or that group. He will gain worship from all of them. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. Revelation 13:7-8. Finally, though, as we learned in Daniel 7, the court will sit and judgment will be passed in favor of the saints. And as we read in Daniel 8, he shall be broken, but by no human hand. Daniel 8:25. Jesus will break the little horn, destroy the kingdom, kill the little horn, and throw the demon in the lake of fire. That completes our overview of the Antichrist. If you want to see a similar video, click on the link. Until then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.